It's actually been quite eye-opening and kind of helpful to have a mixture of what's going on. Schlumberger being offshore, and they do multiple facets in the oil and gas industry, are embedded in policy in a big way. They've got a procedure and a process for everything, from how to have a meeting to the meeting itself to how frequently, everything else. So the personalities that came over there were quite good at being systematic. Liberty kind of fly by the seat, but not in a cowboy way. So safety's first. Mark Meadows is a great example. He's been an asset for us taking on the Permian safety division.
Our mission, and we choose to accept it, is zero injuries and zero environmental impact. A healthy workforce and environment is key to our nation's continued success. The Mission Zero podcast is a deep dive with the industry's top experts into the health, safety, and environmental aspects of today's workplace. Our mission is to be a platform for new ideas and strategies that, when implemented, will improve our safety, our environment, and how we govern our business. We are making the world safer, and we're going to have fun doing it.
Okay, welcome everybody back to the newest episode of the Mission Zero podcast. Have an absolute joy of a guest coming in from all the way from Colorado today with us. Brodie Leggett from Liberty Oilfield. He is the Quality and Customer Compliance Manager for Liberty. Welcome, Brodie.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Glad to be here.
Also, great today. I have one of my partners in crime, Justin Overstreet from Wildcat Oil Tools, here to help me be my co-host today and bring his knowledge and plethora of knowledge to the business to this conversation. So, welcome, Justin. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
So, Brodie, thank you. I know a long way from home, and I appreciate it. Liberty came out with their annual report and had a lot of great safety news and a lot of great environmental news. So it's really a great time to have you on here to kind of explain some of that, explain how you achieve those things. But at first, you'll notice when you're talking, you got a little bit of an accent. So can you tell us about your background, where you're from, and what got you to the point where you're at now?
Sure, Jeff. Bit of a long story where to start. I was born 2 years after Zimbabwe turned into Zimbabwe from Rhodesia after independence in 1980. I was born in 1982, and I stayed there till I was probably 21, late 20s, 21. And I headed over to England and started selling. I was actually a recruitment controller for a company that used to go door to door and sell gas and electric. So
they sold what?
Yeah, we sold gas and electric.
Oh, okay.
Door to door. So we're going
Like the service?
Yes. So it was monopolized by British Gas, and it was deregulated by Margaret Thatcher, and it opened up the doors for other companies to come in. And the basics of it was the same gas through the same pipes, and it was just an office that you got the bill from, and that's what we'd go and sell. So, that lasted until 2005 or 6. And then I went up to Scotland in Ben Nevis, and I trained as a deep sea commercial diver. And I did that for probably 7 years after that. I think most of it was Denmark, and I went to Australia for a couple of contracts. North Sea was obviously prevalent. A lot of it was on laying cables for wind farms. So it was clean energy to some extent, but there was a lot of oil jackets and risers and various sort of situations. The lifestyle you found was heavily on a boat. You'd be 3 months offshore, and then that contract would close, and you'd have to go and find another job, basically. It was fun while it lasted, but it got a little bit monotonous, being away for as long as you are, and then as soon as you're finished, you have to either wait for that company to start another contract 6 months later, or you had to look for another job. So from there, I decided to go ahead and follow a bit of a dream to become an engineer. So I went down to Camborne School of Mines in the south of England in Cornwall, and completed a mining engineering degree, during which I was active in the sports front with games that the Americans actually set up 36 or 38, nearly 40 years ago, called the International Collegiate Mining Games. And the games were set up in honor of the lives that were lost in a pretty severe fire in an American mine, Sunrise Dam, I believe it was, the mine. But the games were old school mining techniques to keep the tradition of mining alive in the modern day. You'd fill a 2-ton bucket with dirt, and it was a race to see which school could do it the quickest. You would survey across some land and come back to your starting point, and you'd show that your results were as close as you started. And you would drill a hole in concrete using a hammer and a chisel, and there was normally a team of 5 guys. You'd have 2 minutes on the go. Anyway, it was pretty fierce competition. And as the years have gone by, that's grown more and more following, and there's quite a bit of prestige to be at the top of that. So it was in my...
So it's still currently going on?
Oh, yeah. Every year...
Kind of like the Highland Games.
International Collegiate Mining Games. And every year it's hosted in a different country. So wherever you are, you'd have to fund your airplane tickets and get your crews over there. And we had three teams, a men's A, a men's B, and a co-ed. And then a chaperone to take the pictures and carry the bags, I suppose. But I'd started that my second year. It was in my third year. I was actually captain for it, and so I needed to find the sponsorship money to get the guys going. So I turned to many email addresses that I begged out of my lecturers and teachers and said, come on, help me out. Who am I going to turn to ask some cash? Luckily, it's a mining school, so a lot of the alumni from the Campbell and School of Mines are they've done okay. And for some reason, it's a very loyal, very passionate community, the miners. And so the guys who have left were heavily involved in the school. So it didn't take much and didn't take long before I generated a fair bit of money. And sure enough, we did. We got our teams over to in my second year when I just joined second year of the degree when I just joined the mining games team. We came over to Colorado. And then in the third year where I was the captain, it was Butte, Montana, and there was another one in Missouri. But we did well. We got 5 golds and 7 silvers across the board, and I think that was the first time we'd actually got a gold apart from 5 years ago in survey. So we did well. So that wrapped up that section of life. After which it was time to go and find a job. Now that I've got my qualification. And so it was actually the first email I wrote. I wrote to one of the guys who sponsored us, Mark Pearson. He works for Liberty Resources. And I said to Mark, thanks for that money that you gave me a couple of months ago. Can I have a job? And he said, yeah, sure, why don't you come over? So Mark flew me over, and he's with Liberty Resources, which is an operator. And he put me on with Liberty Oilfield Services as a field engineer. And it was in the interim between finishing the degree in England in July and me starting over here in 2015, February 4th, that I decided that was a long enough period for me to head back home. I hadn't been home in probably 10 years. I touched base here and there, but in terms of a long, decent holiday to catch up with the family and things, it had been a while. So I went and spent a good 2 or 3 months back in Zimbabwe with the parents in Harare, and enjoyed the good weather and the time off. And then I flew over to the States, and they put me in North Dakota for 5 straight weeks.
Very similar weather to Zimbabwe, right?
Absolutely, spot on. Yeah, that was an eye-opening experience. I was wearing that many layers. I was pretty useless. I was walking around like Michelin Man, and 7 days a week. It was tough for 5 straight weeks to be involved in that level. Night shift, day shift would rotate every second week, and it was tough to get into the groove in those temperatures.
Is the political situation pretty good in Zimbabwe now, or is it pretty easy to visit? Is your family safe?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You found that the history of Zimbabwe and the ultimate collapse of Rhodesia, and then Zimbabwe did quite well. The original president, Robert Mugabe, he was an educated man. He was pretty good at what he did. Had he pointed his ambitions in the right direction, he would have served that country very well. For the first 7 or 8 years, he did. He kept the economy really alive. It was 1-to-1 with the US, 2-to-1 with the pound. Phenomenal. And then one day it just stopped. There was many, many reasons and explanations that we can think of, but land distribution taken away from farmers that were well established, that were doing tobacco. 16,000 acres of land would be split up and divvied out to apparent ex-war vets, but some of these war vets were like 21. Obviously didn't fight in the war. Yeah, it went downhill. So not too much blood as you'd think of, takeovers like that and countries falling apart, especially when you hear of Africa side of things. The West Coast is fraught with just a lot of sad news, child soldiers and abuse and things like that. Zimbabwe didn't suffer too much. There was some slaughtering. There was some livestock was killed to get people off the farms, and land distribution was pretty rough. But as a whole, it's just the economy.
The squatting thing was a big deal.
Yeah.
I remember reading about that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, good to hear, they're safe and you can actually go home and visit your family. So that's great. So you now you're in the United States. You start with Liberty here in the United States. So you've been with Liberty the entire time.
I did. Yeah. Loyalist to the end. They've done me proud. Put me in as field engineer. You sit in, I'm not sure how familiar you are with frac, but hydraulic fracturing is a process where you stimulate a well. Nowadays we call it unconventional drilling, where you drill down, sometimes it's 3 miles, 2.5 miles, and then you take a turn and you drill horizontal. Inside, you carry on the wellbore inside the formation that is bearing oil. Over here it's tight gas and shale. The purpose of fracturing is to create a conduit or pathway for the oil to get back to the reservoir so it can come out the hole. There's a lot down there. It's just in pockets and it's kind of locked up. So the idea of stimulating a well through hydraulic frac is just to increase the productivity and maximize the lifespan of that well. And so I was put into a field engineer position where you sit in a data van and you monitor the pressures and the amount of sand, and you try and stick as best you can to the design that the customer's set in place. How much sand you put into the well, which we call proppant. And the idea is once you push really hard with a fleet of trucks that are connected downhole through a network of pipes into the well, and that pressure goes down to the wellbore, through the wellbore, out to the perforations, and then it sends a fracture away from the well, okay? Once you stop pushing with those trucks, once you come offline, those fractures are going to close. So what they do is they put proppants in place to prop it open. That's why it's called proppant. So the sand holds those fractures open over time and then retains the pathway for that oil to come back. So the engineer would sit in front of 5 or 6 screens, looked proper geekish, and just monitor a whole bunch of data, put it together in a visual format, record things like the time tracker, minute-by-minute record of what we're doing and why we're doing it, catch the incoming deliveries of sand and watch the flows of the sand coming down the wellbore and make sure the densities are right and things like that. So we'd sit alongside and help the other fella in the data van, which was the treater, who would be calling the shots out in the field and guiding the guys outside and what the next step is and when we're going to change the amount of sand that we're moving and when we're going to stop and when we're going to just run some acid or when we're going to run fresh water and things like that. So that was 2 years in North Dakota, and then I did 1 year as a field engineer in the DJ, Denver Julius, which is obviously the Denver area in Colorado. And then after that, I moved into the office as the compliance guy under Jack Amont and Michael Tuwami. So,
can you tell us, in detail what your task for that position?
So, the intention was to create a position that was very familiar with the documentation and the document control, and then be able to work with customers and be that bridging personality that could clearly understand and explain to customers how what we're doing matches what their requirements are, and also to fully understand what they were asking for so that we could answer the question and be the best we can be without changing too much what we do. So some of it is simply sitting down in an audit with a customer and saying, right, here's the documentation that proves how we do this and why we do it and how long we keep it for. That's in line with what you're requesting. And then if they have requests to go above and beyond, then it's my position to try and figure out how to best implement that at Liberty to keep the customer happy, but also to keep us doing what we do the way we do it. Because one of the strongest points with Liberty is the culture of what we did. We're in a hydraulic frac. We're the experts, and we have been good at it for as long as I've been with them, and we want to try and keep things the way they are. So to avoid too much red tape and paperwork, we want to keep the culture safe, and we want to keep it flowing. And so the intention, that's why they start at my position.
Okay. So as an oilfield service company, you've got many times competing priorities from what the customer wants, and like you said, your processes are in place and have been for a good amount of time and functioning properly. And how do you kind of manage those expectations between the customer and your operations team, who your operations team naturally wants to continue doing it the way they're doing it, and the customer might say, yeah, I see that you guys are going to 7, we need you to go to 10, or whatever. How do you manage those competing priorities, and at what point do you push back on a customer?
It's a good question, and it's one that I've always feared going into audits. You're always worried, why are they auditing us? What's caused this? A lot of it's just, hey, it's been a year, it's been 2 years, we just want to check in. And my job's been made very easy by Liberty's operation team. They put a lot of stages in the ground. We've got, it's been a while since I've looked at the numbers coming out of engineering into compliance, but our efficiency, how much time we spend putting sand in the ground, putting stages away, is 20 to 25% ahead of other people, other companies. So we've done very well. So it does, and then the safety record's been pretty good as well. There's been no compromise. Let's do really well, but at the expense of safety. That's not happened with us. So the questions have never really come our way. We've never had customers running up saying, like, things are going wrong, can you please tighten up here or there? Of course there have been. I would have said that to do an audit, for a customer to audit us and sit us down and look at some paperwork, my counterpart on the other side, the customer's compliance guy, possibly maybe wouldn't be doing his job if he didn't look for a hole. And sometimes you find a lot of these situations are not got-yous exercises, but they're like, we've come together today to make sure that you're doing the best and we can grow. Growth is what keeps people innovative, and innovation is what keeps you at the front, the leading edge, and being one of the better companies to work with, which is why we're chosen. Not the cheapest, but we have good results. Having said that, the customers will say, right, let's take a look at this policy. Lockout tagout, for instance. There's millions of ways of lockout tagout.
Sure.
And the safest way is to basically pack up the trucks, send everybody home, and lock them in the cupboard. Nobody come out, and that's the best way to be safe. You can't do that. So at some point we have to go out there and we have to put on the gloves and get some grease on our hands and go and make a plan. And to keep people safe doing that, it seems every customer's got a different rendition of the best way to do it. That's when I would turn around and say, particularly with lockout tagout, and say, please can you work with me here? We have been doing this for a long time. We haven't hurt anybody severely. No fatalities. We everything that we've done has been significant in terms of keeping our safety figures great. Our lockout, we are the hydraulic frac experts. Could you let us just run this lockout tagout procedure the way we have been doing it? And sometimes they'll sit back and say, I accept that, that's a great answer. And sometimes I'll be like, I'm sorry, but we just need just a few things. And some of it's small, like, you're all locking it out, but can I have a name on that lock? And then a picture, and then the phone number, and then an address, and it gets out of control. But
it does get out of control, and what it ends up sometimes doing is unintentionally driving more of a systemic change. And so how do you have you encountered that? And like you said, for the most part, your customers work with you, and I've had that experience also because I've done the same interfacing that you're doing. But have you encountered that? And then when you did encounter that, did you say, okay, well, we'll make that concession for this customer only? Or at what point do you make the concession that, okay, this is something we have to change completely across the board?
Yeah, I think I see where you're going. We have had to make tailored documents. Bridging documents we're not a fan of. I think we've done one. And we've been around since 2011 was when we set up the first fleet, and I think we went down hole in 2012. So it took over Christmas for us to set it up. But I think in that time period, we've done one or two bridging documents from my side of things. Legalities, MSAs, that's a different story. But just from health and safety and the compliance side of things, how we do things, why we do things, we've done very, very few bridging documents. There's a few things that are tailored particular to customers, the very, very big customers that are quite bureaucratic or they're heavily embedded in policy, and they don't really have a choice to allow us to do it our way. They've just got it written down. And if we want their work, then the best way is just try and follow. So there's a couple of things where we have got lockout, tagout policies defined for them. But I think Jacquemont came a long way when he did he made a move when he came on board as the he's the HSE director. And he brought in something called a field safety representative. So it's a bit like we took a great step forward on purpose because we could see the world drifting heavily towards safety. And so we took a big step for safety above and beyond what everybody else is doing. And we have a personality, a position, which is kind of commonplace now. But back when it started at Liberty, it was pretty rare, cutting edge, you could say. But that personality's role is to just focus on safety. He sits out there, a dedicated safety personality on that crew to walk around and check things like fire extinguishers. The green hats, because we got a short service employee is somebody who's only been with us for 6 months or less. And we denote him as a green hat so that we know, what guys are doing. They're within their experience range. And they're
real quick, just to clarify that for some of the audience, depending on who you are on a site, you're given a color helmet to help you identify.
That's right.
And that's pretty common across the oil industry, right? A green hat just says, look, you're new. Visitors have a different color hard hat as well. So just for the audience, that's what he means by the green hat. So
that's right. Yeah. Liberty, if you're an equipment operator, you're in a red hat. If you're a leadership member, you're in a white hat. If you're new, you're in a green hat. A lot of people will come over from other companies and join Liberty, and they'll have a wealth of experience. And it's a little tough at first to say, here's your green hat, get out there. But they all understand that you've got to prove it's a proving ground, oil field. You've got to earn your dust. And so it wouldn't take long for us to promote those guys because we can clearly see the bottom line when people ask me, when do I give somebody a red hat? When do I promote them from green hat? And I would say once you're sure that that person is safe and understands what he's doing around such dangers that are present in the frac field, at that point you can give him a red hat. Once he's okay on his own and he understands what's going on. So yeah, going back to Liberty jumping the gun on the safety side and keeping customers really content and happy with our performance was to make sure our numbers were good, and we did that by putting that safety personality in play, and that's all he does. He walks around and mentors guys. He checks the housekeepings on point. He checks the dates of the iron, making sure that it's certified, and inspect, checks the harnesses, things like that.
Yeah, in working with your West Texas team, they've got a really good line of communication. I'd like to actually have them on for their own episode, how to their communications with the reporting and things. They've really got a good thing going out there. Liberty, in your annual report, showed a safety record that is 18% better than your competition, or not competition, but just the industry, right? Similar companies. Obviously, Tomahawk gloves had a lot to do with that. That's a shameless plug. Besides the greatly improved hand injury record, What do you attribute to that? Do you think the field representative does? Obviously, you think that's important because you just mentioned that. As a company, how are you doing that? How are you, beating out the competition and being much more safer?
I'll second your plug there, and I'll say I've noticed your gloves, Jeff. They're unique, and I think they're kind of more flexible. They add that grip, but yeah, putting gloves on people is a big thing. Hand injuries account for a huge percentage. Mm-hmm. One of the strong points with Liberty is it's a very engineered. It's an engineer stronghold. Like engineers come from the field, and then we push. We use the field engineers as recruiting sources for sales. And I'm an engineer, and we tend to populate all the positions that we've got with an engineer. And geekish as we are, you find that data and trends are something that's pretty quick to analyze if you've got the data available. When we, the communication you mentioned earlier is something we developed with one of our Permian engineers, Akiko, where we did a power apps which is accessible through your phone. So instead of a behavior, so we run the behavior-based safety. That's the system of safety that we use out there. It's part culture, it's part common sense, and it's part observations. If you can submit an observation, say, I think that's unsafe, if it can go to the right hands, and that's one of the key problems that we had in the oil and gas industry. As a matter of fact, even offshore, I found it. Like, there would be an issue, but it wouldn't get to the right person's knowledge that can make a difference. So we developed, instead of using cards that were handwritten and often illegible and forgotten or filed in the wrong place or not read at the safety meets with HSE managers or safety management teams, we developed an electronic system. And you pick up your phone, and there's QR codes on hard hats and on the data vans. You simply scan it like you do a menu during COVID.
Liberty developed this internally.
Yes.
On the benefit of a lot of engineers.
Yes. Yeah, it's actually Power Apps. I mean, not to plug Microsoft, but they've made it very easy.
Yeah.
It's it's very good. It's very good. It's very easy to build, but it's easy to use. It's user friendly, and despite its ease, it grabs a lot of data.
And your field people, and normally I don't get to have this conversation with someone I've worked with so much. They're very appreciative of this program. They think highly of it. They think that that's the feedback I've gotten.
Oh, that's great.
And yeah, I'm being dead serious. It was interesting that when you brought it up, I was like, oh man, I've talked to them in the field, Mark and his team out there in West Texas, and I've talked to them, and that's I wanted to even have them on. It was such a, I think it was a subject that was so good in itself to talk about. I was like, ooh, you accomplished something here. I think that the idea with communications, like you said, is it getting to the right person, and when is it getting to that person? And we had in my second episode of this podcast, we had Cameron Barrett, who's the CEO of Field Safe Solutions in Calgary. You should give that a listen, because he's trying to solve this exact problem that you seem to have been onto, you being Liberty seem to have been onto. So that's very good to hear.
Well, following on from Chris's attitude, if you're in the industry, we're going to look after you. It's actually quite pleasing to see somebody, a CEO like that, who is as competitive as he is. And if you watch him speak, you'll find he's a very amenable, very peaceful, very enthusiastic, very calm personality. But he's competitive, and despite that competitive nature, if something happens in his industry, he's very much pro-fighting for anybody, whether it's a direct competitor or not. If you're in the industry, he's all about it. So yeah, that Power Apps function was a valuable tool, because you can define through, like when you fill out a credit card, right? Yeah. You can't. It's very difficult to make a mistake. There's a box and it says, put your number in. So you put your number in. And then put your last name, put your first name, and some of the numbers. And it's very simple, and keeps you within the lines, and it sets the data that you need on the back end. So once they hit submit, so we did our BOC card system on our phones the same way. Here's a box, choose your district. Here's a box, choose your crew. Here's a box, choose your customer, and everything else like that. So all the important data that helps us analyze it later for trends, like was it at night shift? Was it in the Permian? What was the weather? How many days into their hitch were they? All this data we think is irrelevant, kind of, because the guy slipped, he let go of the truck door handle too quickly and fell over and hurt his wrist. We think it's just that one-off incident, but you'll find when you trend it, it is towards the end of his 2-week hitch. It's night shift.
It always happens on the second Wednesday of every year, every month. Yeah.
So that BOC card system through Power Apps helps us gather data, but I think the most powerful thing with it is it's easy. So you get your own phone that everybody's got. You might not have your car keys, but you've got your phone. Pull up your phone, put in the submission. It can be anonymous, or you can ask for a response from Liberty. And there's text fields as well where you can detail it. So it's not just, stay within the lines that we've decided that you need to submit this, and you can put in whatever you like. And those text fields, once you hit submit and it's done, it goes to the back end on our online systems and automatically goes into reports where we can graph it. And also goes into a database where the HSE managers can pull that week's worth of BOC card submissions and use it as talking points in safety and get with their FSRs, the field safety reps, and get them to get out there and go and see what they can do about minimizing this one that seems to be coming up more and more, and try and catch things before they happen.
So with those observations, and I'm a big believer in observation programs. I know that they can really transform the culture of a company if they're used properly. Do you guys have a quote is a terrible number, but do you guys have a target per person to submit, or do you just say, hey, here's a program, it is transformational and we believe in it, please use it? How do you encourage people to submit observations without setting an outright number for them to set?
It's a great question. We don't have a set number. We also don't demand anything. I think a bit of luck from my end, because it would very much fall into our safety department to create that data if it wasn't coming in. So I think there's probably two aspects going on here. One, there's a very competitive nature between the crews. And two, the ease of getting data that trends makes it easy for you to display and show everyone results. So in a graph, if a crew can see that they're kind of on the low side of things,
as compared to another crew,
another crew, their competitive nature will be like, let's sort that out. So then they go and pick up the speed, and they'll start submissions. You Justin, like if you go and say, right, it's like the police getting speeding tickets. It seems to pick up at the end of the month when they're missing their quota. If you go and say, right, guys, you've got 4 days, but you're 50 away from your target, what's going on? They'll go and start handing in behavior observations cards because there's a book.
You'll get 50 observations on a tree that's losing its leaves or something. It will be something like that. It's
gloves on the right color. Please, can you get some red ones?
Correct.
So we avoid erroneous data coming in by forcing people to submit things when they're just not ready. We can tailor things as well to increase the numbers, but still keep the data beneficial. One of our customers recently asked in an audit, hey, the whole industry, as you know, has got stop work authority. If you see anything wrong and you feel that it's a threat, it's a safety threat, a risk to either personnel, equipment, whatever it is, you can stop the job. Do you have a system for recording when stop work authority was exercised? And we hadn't. So then we linked into this Power App, and it was that easy. You can just add a category. So the behavior...
Add a category to the observation program that existed already. So the behavior
observation program, it's now not actually submitting a BOC card, but it is submitting a card, but the card's value is in the fact that it's a mark or a tag for, hey, I exercised my stop work authority because this guy was swinging a heavy hammer and there was grease on his hand. And I think he was tired, a bit of fatigue, and I asked him to stop. And so we can start monitoring things like that. So again, very powerful, very versatile. Good old Microsoft Power Apps.
I want to switch gears just for a few minutes, and I won't ask any, too complicated or too detailed questions about it. But also in the annual report showed for 5 straight years your emissions have gone down from your from your diesel, your diesel pumps, you've become more efficient with it every year. It seems like almost every year Liberty had a new design that improved that, right? Are you guys have any plans, or are you moving to Efrac like a lot of the companies are doing out there? Is it something that Liberty's looking at? If so, why or why not?
Yeah, we are. We're always trying to step forward. One, you've got to stay within your economic purpose of the business. You have to make money. So we have to keep stages in the ground. We have to keep customers happy. We have to find ways of doing it cheaper. One of the strengths with the American industries is that it's not a strength really, but it's a little bit more expensive to get oil out of tight gas sands. It takes a bit more effort and time. It's not just a matter of poke a hole in the ground and like a straw sucking out of a glass, the oil comes out. You have to really work at it over here to get it out. But our efficiencies during the downturns went up so much that now we're getting better and better, and we're looking for areas where we can improve all the time. It started off with not fears, but expectations that the rules and the regulations are going to become more and more stringent. So to keep ahead of the game, we developed a quiet fleet. So we've dropped the decibel output from the fleets from what they used to be as roaring, and we encapsulated it. And now the pumps, you can actually stand between them when they're in idle, and you can have a phone conversation. So they're significantly reduced, and that's on the sound side. Emissions is in line with the technology that's available out there, and knowing that the more you reduce it, the better your footprint. Drifting towards using dual fuel fleets where you can pull natural gas back and start running your fleets on natural gas and not just pushing diesel. That's a big innovation that's being pushed in the field. And then the electric fleets, now that we've taken on Schlumberger's frac assets, that's become more and more of a focus. And I think we've been doing it and looking at it for a while beforehand anyway. But now it's a big drive to get that way. You've just got to balance where to get the electricity from. Because if you're going to start running generators, you're back into running diesel. So a lot like Elon Musk, where he's pushing electric cars and he's pushing solar. We're trying to balance out the damage you're doing to the environment from mining that solar to powering those batteries. Where's the tipping point? And we're still feeling that oil and gas is per kg calorific value is worth cleaner than going in other routes for now, apart from nuclear. But that's difficult. That's another story.
How have you guys, for those who don't know, as you mentioned, Liberty did merge or acquire Schlumberger's pressure pumping group or fracking group. A lot of new people, a lot of different culture. I've tried to talk to Mark Meadows, your Permian HSC lead, about that. Doesn't have enough time to talk at all these days. But how have you, as a company, I won't ask you how, but has it been easier than you thought it would be? Has it been more difficult than you thought it would be to merge two different safety cultures together as one company?
It's actually been quite eye-opening and kind of helpful to have a mixture of what's going on. Schlumberger being offshore, and they do multiple facets in the oil and gas industry, are embedded in policy in a big way. They've got a procedure and a process for everything, from how to have a meeting to the meeting itself to how frequently, everything else. So the personalities that came over there were quite good at being systematic. Liberty kind of fly by the seat, but not in a cowboy way. So safety's first. Mark Meadows is a great example. He's been an asset for us taking on the Permian safety division. Most of I think a high majority of the fracs that are going on right now are coming through his division. So he's gone from quiet to really, really noisy really quickly. And the addition of Nate Donnie coming on, and there's Jason Garcia down in Shreveport as well. But Nate's got a very driven personality when it comes to paperwork and getting things buttoned off, while Mark Meadows was very much in the field and talking to people and gathering data. And a combination of those two, it's a bit of a lightning bolt when it comes to needing to get things done. It's an effective move. The culture itself has been tough. We had a downturn. It was really hard for us to suffer a lot of the losses that we had to go through to survive as a company in the last year and a half during COVID, and to see that off with the merger or acquisition or takeover of Schlumberger's Efrac and wireline assets felt like a huge oasis in a long desert that we walked through, and we weren't sure where it was going to go. But to see that those extra 1,000-odd people come on board, it has been a bit of a challenge to exact Liberty's culture from what we had into those guys, because it's basically doubled our size. So we've done what we can. We put people through our new hire orientation classes and teach them the Liberty way and what the trucks look like and how they work, and spread out the crew leadership that we have that were with Liberty over into the blue fleets that we affectionately call Schlumberger's fleets right now. And I think the FSRs have been pretty invaluable as well, because they've been able to, because they're not a mission critical position. They're not running a blender or driving the hydro or working the data van. They had the opportunity to get in the truck and drive over to the blue fleets and start looking at where their strengths were and integrating where our strengths were, and slowly but surely just teaching the culture inside the blue fleets without actually bringing the red guys over. So it's a transition, and it's taking its time, but so far it's been pretty easy from my side, I think.
So your field safety, field safety reps, and you mentioned earlier that they're essentially is one per crew. Do they, lack of a better term, live with that crew, or do they have multiple crews that they're safety representative for? I'm just curious from that standpoint, especially when it goes to the culture question. And sometimes this is just not possible, but if you have in my way of thinking, if your field safety rep lived with that crew, they were together all of the time, then you could develop a pretty strong rapport and pretty strong culture. There could be some downsides to that too, but I'm just curious how you guys look at that. Is it a one-for-one relationship, crew to FSR, or is there another ratio that's used?
Yeah, when that FSR program was started, that was exactly it. It was dedicated safety position, and dedicated doesn't just mean safety, it was to that crew. As we've expanded, you either make cuts where you can, or you collapse. No point in collapsing. You have to keep people alive. So the FSR team didn't expand as quickly as we did the crews. So that's unfortunate. But one of the benefits with that is now you're taking a personality who sees all the good, like I just explained, on one crew, and when he goes and visits another crew, he goes and spreads that good news, those good ideas over there as well.
Yeah, I think there's value in that for sure. Yeah. And you're exactly right. The idea is to grow that position, but you just can't. Business conditions and things like that don't allow that for right now. So it makes sense to use them as you can. Yeah,
they've made it very clear that safety is a priority. Sure. So whilst the field safety rep position was extra, you could say, we've had it doing so well for us for so long, it's actually feels like more of a critical position. So we're never going to get rid of the FSRs entirely. But expanding them in tough times, that would not be the smartest move just yet.
That's a position that's sort of elastic, right? You can grow and shrink as
and it's
needed.
Fairly valuable, even when you dilute it a little bit. It still has a lot of the same values, especially when that FSR is good enough to know that he can turn to his crew leadership on one crew and teach them what he was doing. Because the crew leadership is a white hat, and we have 3 white hats on every single crew, and they are dedicated and they're always there. One's in the data van, one's possibly training, and the other one's roaming. And that roaming can actually take on a lot of the FSR duties. So we managed to get the FSR to kind of just spread the good intentions as to his checklists and what he goes through every day, and get the crew leadership to try and start chipping in and helping where he can with the safety side of things, which they always have done, but now it's kind of documented. As HSC Director Jacob once famous for saying, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen.
That's a fact.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
Well, Brodie, Liberty, in my experience with them, from the top down, from the bottom up, is a great organization. You're a perfect example of that. I really appreciate you coming, lending your expertise, and obviously your soothing Rhodesian accent to our audience. Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. Justin, any final thoughts? Anything?
No, I've learned quite a bit. I'm going to follow up with you about the Power Apps thing. I think that's a unique solution to something, and I've looked into having that built, and it can be financially limiting. So I'm curious a bit more about that. So offline, you and I can chat about that some. So, but it's been great meeting you and hanging out.
Likewise. Nice to meet you, Justin. Jeff, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Brodie.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show and accept the mission. Please subscribe to the Mission Zero podcast on your preferred streaming service and be sure to give us a 5-star review.